is a topic which I believe requires no introduction. However, yesterday I was at another conference and we were speaking of should the EU keep setting global standards in certain things. And I think the topic of sustainability is an excellent topic where the EU is indeed setting global standards. So there shouldn't be a question if somebody bullies us into reducing those standards, whether or not we should reduce them. I don't think we should. But the question is, what type of standards do we want to set? And today's discussion, since it's a Master of Digital, we look at how we can leverage new technologies, new digital services to help set those standards in the field of sustainability. And what role does the EU want to play globally in indeed setting the standards? So the question is whether we should or should not. The question is, how can we do so? So with me, I have an excellent panel today. Thank you so much for joining me. Since none of you need any recognition on this topic, I'm not going to deep dive into introductions, and I'm going to rather just jump into the discussion. And Florika, if I may start with you, I would normally ask, are sustainability goals aligning with economic growth? But I did some research on you, and I really love how you said that the EU has shown that we can successfully limit our environmental footprint while growing our economy. And I think this is the way how we should treat it. So I'm going to reverse the question a bit and ask you in a different way. How do you see that digital transformation is aligning with the EU's sustainability goals, not vice versa? So how the digital transformation aligns with the sustainability goals, particularly when we talk about fostering circular economies, water resilience, and what are some of the key milestones here?
Thank you, and first of all, thank you for being here. And I have to say, it's quite a cool view from here to see you all with the earphones. And I can say already there, the Commission as regulator, we are lagging behind, that's for sure. I mean, we are not on that, not too techy yet. But yesterday, when we had the award ceremony, the Secretary General, Cecilia, she said, show me your friends and I know who you are. The fact that I'm here and many other sustainability officers from private companies are here shows that, yes, we have to work together. You had the Green Deal last mandate, and it was all about green and digital. That sounds good, but I have to admit, I don't think we went very far. Now we try again under more competitiveness and also simplification, digitalization. Let me start what we had achieved. Of course, on the green transformation, we have gone very far, and we have the pathway on decarbonization, but also resource depletion. Now, under this mandate, it's much more about circularity, but circularity is basically about lowering your environmental footprint, your resource depletion, and look at not only bankable resources, but also things like water, which so far were not really bankable, or at least not seen as it, but not only just critical raw materials. We have used, and we do use, digital solutions. Think about Earth observation, satellite, Copernicus, destination Earth, all of that we do. Even in my area, when we look at air quality, basin water quality, of course, we use digital solutions. But in my view, we haven't done enough, and that's where we now, when we have a focus under the Clean Industrial Deal, which will come out, but also on the competitive compass, very much on circularity, we have to bring the two communities much more together. And because what we have done so far is, I mean, the basics. It's a little bit more about like using sensors, using apps, informing citizens. And of course, that's very important because then you get the buy-in. But really working with public-private partnership, not so much. Under the simplification competitiveness agenda, I think there's a huge potential to really pull now the data sets that we have, and also in order to lower for member states, but also for SMEs and others, the reporting burden in particular. But there's a little bit a drawback. Often member states, they do not like necessarily only satellite images or sensors, and they say, it's not mine, even though they are super accurate and probably easy to take up. So there we have to find, as a regulator, a middle ground where we say, we pre-fill in certain data for you, and then you, of course, can verify, you can complement. But this is, I think, where we have to go in new regulation forms, the pre-filling of data, and using much more the digital data that is out there. Another part which I think we have not used enough and which is particularly important in the environment or climate field is using big data. Because in Europe, we are very rich in data sets in member states, and we have agencies like the Environmental Agency, we have the Chemical Agency, we have many agencies, we have our research center. We do have data. But do we bring that together? And then do we analyze the data in order to see, like, what will be the trend? Where would we have to regulate or not regulate? This uptake of big data is, I think, at least in the environmental sphere, a little bit still in the infant shoes, and could be done more.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. If I may just ask a follow-up question. You mentioned the reporting part and simplification. So in Estonia, which is one of the most digitalized countries in the world, we even realized that we asked from companies 420 different reports. And I'm not speaking environmental reports only, but in general, 420 different reports, which combined our 60,000 data sets. And then it turned out when we looked at each of those reports that 90% of the data is duplicated. So actually, we asked the same data all over and over again. So when the CSDD, the CSRD, so the different types of environmental reports came out from Europe, and then the company started to realize we have another 1,200 data sets that we need to submit. Then one of the biggest industry company owners in Estonia said, bring me this government official who negotiated this, and I want to see this person, you know, to my face and ask them, why did you do this? And of course, now when we asked about the simplification, and this is what also Ursula von der Leyen said, that the first thing where we need to cut off is specifically those sustainability reporting. Do you see it as a threat to achieving sustainability goals, or how do you perceive this?
Just to add on two things. I mean, we don't have to throw out the baby with the bathwater. I mean, you want investment. If you want investment, your shareholders want to know where they go. So you need a certain type of information. Of course, perhaps CSRD, if you look at the data set, is too much. I go back to my area, which I know better, which is environmental data. Yes, there's a lot of gold plating by member states when we go on regulations. We go for regulations. We want to look at the internal market. We don't even use anymore the environmental legal base. We use internal market legal base. And then in the co-decision process, everybody wants to gold plate. This little thing, because I want to make sure that my permitting process will fit. That is a problem. And there we also have to simplify. Now, speaking about permitting, for instance, the use data only once and bring it in once, the once only principle, is something which we really have to hammer down. And as I said, also we in our legislation have to see now where can we simplify. We have a, you talked about also circularity. We will have under the Clean Industrial Deal, the Compass, you will have heard already, we will go and look at the last bits that, like an omnibus, on what we can do under circularity in order to really advance well. And these elements have to come in. But not only that, they also have to be on procurement and on taxation. Because you can facilitate certain things. 100%,
fully agree. Thank you so much. And I think, yeah, so the companies need to understand that sustainability is not a burden on them, or the green goals are not a burden on them, but they are an opportunity. And I think one of the voices, leading voices in Europe on this topic is actually Nicolas, who has said, and I also did some research on you, that the Green Deal remains the only viable growth strategy for Europe's future. And you are also, as I mentioned, one of the loudest voices saying that our clean goals must go hand in hand with digitalization. So I will jump into the question which I have for you, which is, what do you think are the barriers preventing digital technologies from making a larger impact on sustainability efforts in the EU? And how can we overcome those burdens?
First, let me say one thing for the previous discussion. Yeah. Tell these men in Estonia that use artificial intelligence to avoid this duplication and so on. It's a way to use artificial intelligence. I think that we are always saying the regulation. We need simplification, not the regulation. Yeah. And of course, we can use artificial intelligence to solve these problems, not only to use ChatGPT to something that is can do somebody else. So this is a way of solution for some administrative procedures. This
but
is
we
my
need
point.
still proper data to use AI.
Of course, but you know, there is an opportunity, I guess, for artificial intelligence. Regarding the sustainability of the deployment of artificial intelligence, and also, of course, data centers that are one of the main points that I want to speak. It's true. We have a challenge. We need, of course, all this infrastructure to deploy artificial intelligence in Europe to be competitive at world level. But of course, we cannot undermine the Green Deal. That is the only way for Europe to be independent when it comes, for example, to energy. So we have to compatibilize the deployment, the big deployment needed for data centers and the use of energy and artificial intelligence with, of course, the needs that we have regarding the Green Deal and the deployment of new decarbonized energy. So how to do it? First, accomplish the deployment. I think that we need energy efficiency when it comes to data centers. It's absolutely needed. In the Energy Efficient Directive, there are some provisions to do that, but we are also seeing and observing that more technology is needed in the deployment of data centers. For example, the use of all hard disk drive are still used in the deployment of data centers. We have to go for more efficient systems. But of course, we need also additional renewable or decarbonized energy to supply these data centers. And the location of the data centers cannot put pressure or more pressure in the grids, preventing that existing companies like energy-intensive industries have enough supply to their functioning. So we cannot damage one industry because we are implementing another one. So we have to be smart on that. And also to give confidence to the people, because the deployment of data centers should be linked to the energy production. We have to avoid to build new grid infrastructures that is absolutely needed for the energy transition to only transport electricity from one side to another. I give you one example. In Spain, the main expected deployment for data centers is in Madrid, in the center of the country. There are other examples that are not in Madrid, that are very smart examples. But in this case, a lot of deployment is expected there. A lot of requests for grids and the use of grids for data centers. But the energy produced in Spain is not in Madrid. It's produced 400, 500, 600 kilometers away. So this can cause also untrust for the people that they are seeing more and more renewables in their territory, but they don't have the advantage of have data centers and the digital infrastructure. So could be a not fair transition regarding the deployment of data centers. We have to defend this fair transition, this just transition, also in this deployment of data centers. To have people on board also to the digital transition at the time to the green transition. I think it's absolutely key to convince people, to engage people that this is for them and is also have also benefits for them in the energy prices, because you know, if we increase the amount of energy needed for data centers and we don't have enough additional electricity, we have to use the electricity for the domestic sector or the people in the industries, increasing the prices for households and for existing industries. And I think this is not a just deal for them. So I think that household won't have to pay the price for the deployment of data centers, and also when it comes to grid. So be smart on this deployment and go for a very just transition when it comes to the deployment of the use of artificial intelligence in energy.
Mm-hmm. And I think the next question, which I'm going to direct to Claire, already when you started speaking, then Claire was smiling a little bit, because I think AWS is really the perfect company to talk about the energy usage, for water usage in data centers, right? And I also did some research, and I saw that AWS has committed to become, for instance, water positive by 2030, because one of the main resources that we use in data centers is actually water. And perhaps the environmental impact of this has been underestimated. I mean, for you, AWS is clearly higher than a MIA water lead, so perhaps it's not undervalued at AWS, but I mean, as Amazon's EMEA water lead, I mean, this makes you an absolute expert on the topic. And I would like to ask, so the servers, the use of energy, consumption of water, heavy industry that needs a lot of those resources, what steps are actually AWS and what you are taking in order to ensure this more sustainable use of water?
Yeah. Whilst I probably can't speak particularly well to the energy side of the business, Amazon has committed to a water positive goal to return more water to our communities by 2030. We're currently 41% through that goal at the moment, and working towards, obviously, successful completion. When we look at scaling in a new region, we do risk assessments. We look at the catchment model, we look at oversubscription, we look at drought modelling, and we make an assessment based on what we believe is our business risk. And that informs our water strategy. Is the water supply limited because of availability and security issues? Or is it an infrastructure issue and a management issue? And that informs our strategy, and we work with our partners, our local partners, our state partners and governments, to work out what is the best solution to both enable our business need, but also to ensure that the critical infrastructure and the investment is there so that the communities are protected. We do this efficiently by our data centers have a very efficient cooling system. We effectively have our windows open and we bring the cold air in and exhaust it out warmer for most of the year. The challenge for us is when we do need to use water, it's not a huge amount of water, but it is in a critical period where everybody else also needs water. So our concerns and our discussions with governments and utilities and infrastructure investment is associated with resilient supply. So as water is a scarce resource and is becoming more challenging when it comes to scarcity, it's a partnership that's going to make data center scaling and the efficient use of water a success.
And you think it's doable? It's you can do it by 2030 if you're at 41% now.
Absolutely.
Yep.
We have an on-site efficient design, as I mentioned. We use 0.18 litres per kilowatt hour as our water use efficiency, and I believe that's one of the sector's leading indicators. We have off-site replenishment projects, which is our water positive goal, which is returning more water than we use. And those off-site projects could be associated with water quality improvements, nature-based solutions for wetlands and storm retention. We have a project at the moment in Katrineholm where it's a flood alleviation scheme and a stormwater management. And we are partnering with the local utility and the local community to have a storm conveyance pipeline, a new wetland. So it's going to have material impact on risk for the community, water quality, biodiversity, and at the end of the day also have a public amenity for leisure and outdoor education. So there's a lot of benefits.
If I may ask just one brief follow-up question. If you go water positive by 2030, this is going beyond any regulation, right? So this is a commitment of the company itself. Is it driven by the asks or the need from your clients, or is it comes from top down from the company, or where did you get this goal of 2030 water positive? Just to be very curious, I've also worked in private sector, and pre-regulation era of sustainability, we were one of the first European tech companies to go sustainable. So where did this idea for AWS come from?
So I believe it was probably a combination of both. We have a very small water team in AWS, but we are all water sector experts and engineers. And from a company point of view we don't want to be negatively impacting the environments we're operating in. We do want to be seen as a contributor to the environment and the communities we're operating. And so a water positive solution, water is managed very locally and legislated very locally. So each different location we have has different constraints and challenges. So as a team, we wanted to be contributing to those solutions. But as a company, we also wanted to make sure that we were acting responsibly.
I think this is the way to go. And if we look at if you look at the world, well, definitely Europe for sure, then your consumers are not gonna anymore consume your brand, your technology, if you don't look at sustainability goals. It was different when I worked at Bolt, which is the Estonian technology company. When we asked our consumers back in 2020, so just before COVID, we asked them, would you use more sustainable products if offered? Then over 90% said yes. And when we asked them, but would you pay more money in order to use more sustainable products, then more than 90% said no. And I think this is different now. Even fast forward 5 years, people have taken it more to their consciousness. And this leads me to Andrea, actually. And I mean, your entire business model, the entire business model of Danfoss is that you're an engineering company, actually. But you focus on energy efficiency, enhancing machine productivity, reducing emissions. So all of these things you actually do for the customers who clearly need to demand it, because they, even though regulation is maybe away at 2050, but they realize that they need to do something in order to become more efficient. And so maybe my question is, can you just briefly open what is it that your company is doing? And then in more details, what are some of the key factors that should be in place for digital technologies to be more effectively adopted? So how can you convince the consumers, the companies to use more these types of new technologies in order to become more efficient?
Yeah, thank you very much. And first of all, I have to say I'm really happy to see a full room on the topic of sustainability. That's really super encouraging. And it's also encouraging to speak about something else than just security and war and yeah.
Just don't read the news.
Just come with a positive message. And the message that we have here in this group, I think, is a positive one, because we do have the opportunities, the technologies, the possibilities to really contribute and to achieve those goals. And before I answer more specifically your question, I would just like to react to a few of things that were said beforehand on the reporting and on the complexity of the reporting, and also on what you were saying on double reporting and etc. I have to say, from the inside of a company, and Danfoss is a big company, we have over 40,000 employees worldwide, and alone in climate solutions, which is the part of the company I'm working for, we are over 10,000. So if you get those rules and you have to implement them in the company, it is a big, big effort. And you have to really adapt everything you do according to those rules, which is not straightforward. And I can just only imagine how difficult it must be for smaller companies who do not have the means and the resources to deploy that. So simplification there is for sure needed, but then it should not lead to rolling back on it as well. So that, to your point, I think the sustainability reporting in itself is the right way to go. And I think we have a real opportunity with digital solutions there as well, because with digital solutions and with software, you can also get quite a lot of those data. If I'm looking at our users, for example, if you have building software to optimize energy efficiency in buildings, then that software also collects data. And that data can be very important for a housing association, for example, etc., in order to perform their reporting. So there are opportunities there as well, I would say, that we see in this entire context. But
and it was mentioned by Florika also, a better use of this data, of the big data to analyze.
Exactly.
And I think
so
we are not there yet.
Reporting for the sake of reporting, but that you really use it also for optimization. So I think that one I wrote down, I wanted to say. And then on the data center discussion, you mentioned water as one of the important topics, but there is also, of course, the energy topic, which is a very important one. We just had a very, very brief discussion before that panel, and I think, and also looking at the different questions that come in here, I think, yes, the energy use for data centers is going to increase tremendously. But there is also an opportunity in that, because on the one hand side, there is a lot that can be done in terms of efficiency of the data centers themselves and of the cooling of the data centers themselves. And that also relates to water, by the way, because if you take liquid cooling, for example, that's a very good way to reduce the water use and to get away from cooling towers, etc. So there is an opportunity there. And then we have a massive opportunity with the recovery of waste heat from data centers, because the servers, the cooling, generate heat as well. And that heat can be recovered, and then it can be fed into either a district energy network or to the buildings which are close to the data center. And then benefit, and to our discussion just now, and then benefit the population as well. Because if I'm taking the example of our own company, and then I'll answer your question, of our own company, we have a data center where we recover the waste heat, and that's a very straightforward technology with heat recovery modules. And then we feed that waste heat, first of all, into our internal campus network, and there it is used to heat buildings. And then we feed it also into the district energy network, and there the houses around it, they benefit directly, and that has an impact on cost and on resilience and on energy security as such. And the same goes for supermarkets, for example. Supermarkets have a lot of waste heat. They can recover, they can use it themselves, or they can feed it into a network, district energy network or microgrid, which is just around them. So there are huge opportunities, I think, and those can be very much supported by digital technology. So now to your question. So Danfoss has, a little bit like AWS, we have own goals which go beyond legislation. So for example, we have committed to become carbon neutral in our own operations by 2030. And we do that. Of course, it's the purpose of the company, as you were saying in your introduction, but it's also because it makes business sense. And if it
Which is the best combination. If anyone can combine those things, it's
but
the winning
I have
scheme.
to say, from a private sector perspective, if it doesn't make business sense, you don't do it.
Absolutely,
right? So you need, we call it in Danfoss, we call it competitive decarbonization. And the twist here is really, and that's what we applied in our own operations and what we are applying in our own operations, is that all those solutions need to have a short payback. Otherwise, it doesn't take off. And in our case, most of the solutions have a payback, I don't know, of 3-4 years. So it's something which is very tangible for companies. And that kind of also drove us to make those commitments and to go further than what legislation is. And we think that this is something that can be definitely further deployed in the market as well. The difficulty, to your question on what are the barriers, the difficulty is to drive this message into the market and to make it understood by the communities, by the customers, as you were saying on water, for example. The same goes also for energy and energy efficiency. It's not necessarily seen, it's not necessarily understood, it's not known, there is not enough awareness. And then there is also a lack of collaboration. If I'm just coming back on the data center example, we saw that at one of our facilities ourselves. There was a data center close by producing waste heat, a district energy grid close by who could have taken that waste heat. It didn't happen. Why didn't it happen? Because no incentive for the utility. Why would they take it? So then the data center said, why should I? So I think there are things in terms of cooperating between different stakeholders, bring different parties around the table to come to joint solutions, and those joint solutions need to make business sense. To come back on that one. Definitely,
Can I
please, of course.
I agree in terms of sustainability needs an ecosystem-based thinking. A data center is a business. It's there to make money for shareholders, etc. It's not necessarily a barrier, but if implementing waste heat recovery involves more carbon, more energy.
And that shouldn't be the case.
Overall, as an ecosystem for a community, it might be net positive. It might be a beneficial. But we don't yet have those systems-based thinking and incentivization and understanding and education that says, this is better for our community, and this is the impact for this entity, and this entity. And that's something that I think we're still evolving. It's an opportunity as we get more data, as we get more IoT and artificial intelligence. These sorts of things will start to become more visible.
And we have an opportunity as well with Energy Efficiency Directive, if it's properly implemented, with the heat planning, for example, because then at least you see where it's a starting point. You see where is heat available, like a data center, where is heat needed, and then that kind of triggers perhaps the dialogue also between the different stakeholders.
Yeah.
But
well, we have had a lot of questions from the audience as well, but I'm going to do it vice versa now. I'm not going to yet ask this question from the audience. I'm going to ask a question from you. So we actually have a poll for you, which is related to the second question here, which is, which digital technology do you believe has the greatest potential to advance the EU sustainability agenda? It was discussed in basically all of the interventions, so feel free to scan the question and comment whether do you think it's AI, IoT, blockchain, big data and analytics, cloud computing, or any other. So which technology do you believe has the greatest potential to advance the EU sustainability agenda? All, you mentioned all?
All because
Yeah.
all are the
That's a
same.
no-brainer in
I
a
mean,
way.
all are the same part of the same.
Honestly, it's a no-brainer. We're already using a lot on the Internet of Things, but we have to now
How
combine
can you
it. And
use
I mean, you have to do both.
Yeah.
All of that.
Internet of Things without cloud?
Yeah, exactly.
without
Absolutely.
data?
Yeah.
It's not possible.
yeah.
Yeah, others obviously.
So we have to diversify. I mean, we have to look at whatever is the specific type of technology that works for your solutions. And you have to have the companies which understand how to use those technologies, right? I mean, you also mentioned earlier that AI can help you do this reporting, but if you don't have the basic data correct and right, then AI is going to only generate the wrong reports for you.
But also AI can help you in order to tell you where is the existing data, and you can improve the quality of data.
Absolutely.
Can I just quickly, in terms of sustainability and the data, or the digital sector, I was talking with a colleague earlier, and she very clearly broke it down for me, which made sense, is there is off-site or the cloud infrastructure. So that is, how do we build the infrastructure to deliver digitization? Then there's the in the cloud solutions, is how do we build the software and the systems and the mechanisms to make sure we're using those resources efficiently. And then there's the enhancement or the enablement of through the cloud. How do we then apply that to get those benefits? And I think certainly in this sustainability space is getting the data center, getting the data center industry designing sustainably and considerately, understanding our software and how we then build in the cloud to enable and deliver those sustainability benefits also talks to the sustainable economy in energy, in carbon, in water. Data enables better decision making.
Yep. And I see this also, the audience thinks the same way. Data enables better decision making, and big data and analytics are seen as the main things. We discussed here consumer demand, we discussed here using technologies, and I will now go back to Florica and ask the role of the legislation. Energy Efficiency Directive was mentioned here, but the things that you also mentioned in your first intervention, such as the water resilience strategy, the new one, and the Clean Industrial Deal even, how can they work together and actually address the EU's competitiveness question while focusing on the sustainability aspect? And this round of interventions, I would ask you to keep shorter so we can ask everyone one more question. Yeah.
But I would like to link one of these issues with what was just said on
For sure,
water.
yeah.
Because the water resilience strategy will not be legislation. We have the best acquis on water legislation in the world, which is actually copied by many big powers, actually. Just to say,
EU standard setting.
We are not doing that.
Yeah.
But what we are realizing, you were talking about energy. On energy and renewables, we only learned the hard lesson after the Ukraine invasion, or invasion of Ukraine by Russia. And then we scaled up and we did a lot. But here on water, we will face scarcity. And it's water stresses that are coming. And when you have drought, you also have flash floods and everything else. So on water, we wanted to anticipate because we still have time for it. And therefore, this water resilience strategy is not just, it's mainly about awareness rising, but then really going, where does the innovation has to go? Where does the investment has to go? Because we will team up with the EIB. We will promote the water efficiency first principle. We have things which are important for digital companies, like from lab to fab. Yes, all of this will be in. But when we look at the uptake of digital, we already have that, and we should do that much more. It's a question also of money, of smart meters, smart membranes, smart cleaning systems, smart pumps, whatever you call it. There are to identify leakages, which is huge in the European Union. And it's not just south, it's also north. We have a problem on groundwater, not enough groundwater in the north. It's not just in the south. So we need to collectively look at it, and that's what the water resilience strategy wants to promote. But when I look now at the opportunities, going back on the data center, and one of the questions before was, it was on carbon footprint, but it's also on the use of resources. And water is one of the very, very scarce resources that we will see coming. And it is for the consumer, the citizen, it is for large parts of industries, food industry, tourism, everything else. But it's also for energy, cooling of nuclear plants, but also if we have more uptake of data, which is we should have, then we will need more water for cooling. I very much agree with, we look for much smarter solutions than that. We also have to look at how to use the water that we have. We have the clean water, we have the grey water, we have the green water, which is the forest, the wetlands, the peatlands, everything that retains water and makes sure that we have a cycle of precipitation. So the green water, the blue water, is very precious. And any industry can invest into that as well, with nature credits, for instance. But you should also look at the grey water, and then we have black water. But the grey water, because there is potential to clean up and you reuse it. And the reuse of water will be a big, big issue for us, even looking at desalination and other things. So for us, when we want to continue on the green transition, knowing that one of the key resources that anybody will have to have, no matter what sector you are in, we have to anticipate on water scarcity. And that's one of the issues. But there, I'm also very much banking on industry, because we want to really spur the uptake and the use of very smart industries in Europe. We have very, actually we have leaders in water technology, often simple things, more mechanic, and sometimes very much on high digital systems. And that we need to scale up. And this is why there is also an investment part. But we have to be also looking what will be the next challenges, not just what we are facing now. How can we anticipate what innovation do we need? And I very much agree with what Andrea said. Cooling, go for different types of cooling. Water cannot be used for cooling. It's far too scarce, but also might be very expensive. And we don't want to have this distribution conflicts, which inevitably will come. Does it go first to the citizen, the farmers, because we need food, for certain types of industry, for the data industry? So we need to anticipate that, and therefore look as a whole society, whole governance approach. And that we will look also in our legislation.
So beyond the strategy and the legislation, we need infrastructure and financing in order to use the water better as a resource. So Nicolas, how can the European policy in the future ensure that when it comes to water management, actually we have the proper financing and infrastructure for it?
First, planning is very important. You know, all the data centers deployment should be also included into the spatial planning and the planning, water planning, on local municipalities, also regional, but also national and EU level. We have to know very well what is really happening with the use of water consumption in data centers and artificial intelligence. And also we need, I think, the harmonized standards, implement EU-wide standards that are also comprehensive and attractive for business. You mentioned that you have your own objectives. Cannot be probably the same standard for everybody, but we have to work towards a new standards. I think there are also initiatives, pilot projects like the green algorithms, that we can also have labels for artificial intelligence saying which artificial intelligence has more, not only energy efficiency, also water use, efficient use of water. And of course, we need support for innovation. In Europe, it's clear that others are putting a lot of money in the deployment of this digital infrastructure. We need more support. We need clear support. And we need, of course, if we want to be champions of something, we have to be champions in budget. And the European budget should be at the level of the challenge that we are facing. Because we are speaking all the day about defense or security, but there will be not security. We don't have this kind of deployment of technologies or the use of energy or the use of water, because the scarcity of water is also a problem of security. So we have to be smart in order that this is a great challenge for Europe, to have a good budget and enough budget for all the challenges we have.
Thank you so much, and thank you for being concise. So budget is one of the constraints. Planning is one of the approaches how to handle it. Claire, what other constraints perhaps you see for proper water management, secure water management in Europe?
So I would probably build on that a little bit. We've got budgets and we've got planning.
Yeah.
We also need mechanisms to enable public-private partnerships. That is one way that responsible companies can contribute to resolving the problems. At the moment, I don't feel as though that's something that is easily accessible, readily to go, let's go and do it. It's something that still takes quite a lot of resources and time before we get to the delivery.
When I was thinking about budget, I was not thinking in Amazon. You have enough for yourself. You don't need public money. I mean, to be honest, I have to say.
Thank you. So time is running relentlessly, unfortunately. But Andrea, so you heard all of those things regarding constraints to water management or how to improve the water management. How can digital solutions contribute there? Generally, we spoke about digital solutions when it comes to, in general, sustainability. But when it comes to specifically water management, what does your company see? What are some of the solutions there?
Well, I think it's very much also about monitoring and about it comes back to what we said earlier. I think I can be very concise here. We were saying you make informed decisions when you have the data available, and if you want to have the data available on water management, then you need to have the sensors in place, you need to have the monitoring in place. So then collect those data and then don't put them in a drawer, but actually do something with it. And that's maybe a general point also, if I link it back to the energy context and again to the Energy Efficiency Directive as well. We have energy audits, for example, and unfortunately there is data available then and information available, but there is no obligation, no incentive to act unless it makes a business, unless the business case is very clear, then people will act. But then they will act anyway. They don't need an audit. So I think there needs to be a driver and an incentive to first of all collect the data and then also to
properly use it
with the data.
Okay, so we're running out of time, or we are out of time. So one last question for each one of you, which I ask you to answer in one sentence. So I started this discussion by saying that Europe should absolutely set the standards, and I think we are the third biggest single market in the world, and we are the area which, when it comes to sustainability, knows what we have to do. So what do you think is one mistake that Europe cannot do? So normally you ask people, what should Europe do? I'm going to ask you the other way. What is one mistake we cannot afford when we are now setting this Green Deal, sustainability goals, and these standards globally? Whoever wants to go first.
I can go first, because it's going backwards on what we have achieved, going backwards on the Green Deal, going backwards on the green transition, or whether you call it economic transition, but going backwards, that would be really very bad.
Perfect. I think it's absolutely right. We cannot give up to bullies. Thank you. Who wants to go next?
For the order.
Please, yes.
Okay. For me, it's very important to continue to ensure that the Green Deal is going to happen. Not stepping back in all the measures. Don't open the taxonomy, please, Commission. Don't break the standards that we set. Don't use the omnibus to undermine the green agenda. It's a clear and concise message.
Yes, messaging is important. Let's not go back and let's be clear in our messaging. Claire?
I would say not to miss the opportunity to simplify, is making sure that the reporting needs are exactly what we need to report to enable smart decisions.
So people don't see it as a burden, but an opportunity.
Correct.
Yes. And Andrea, you have the finishing word.
Very similar. Don't overcomplicate.
Don't overcomplicate. Okay, so everyone in this room realizes you cannot go back on Green Deal. We have to focus on the sustainability and agenda. We have to be clear in our messaging. And let's not overcomplicate this topic. Thank you so much for being here with us today. Thank you so much.
Thank you.